welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us at this next HOLOPLOT webinar on Sphere and how to capture the sound of Sphere in your venue. My name is Natalia Szczepanczyk. I'm a segment manager for Immersive and Experiential applications here at HOLOPLOT. I've been with the company for about 5.5 years now, and when I actually started in Gareth's team and worked with Emad El-Zakir, who is the lead designer of Sphere itself. So I'm quite familiar, let's say, with the project itself. So that's why I'm here. And I'm joined here by Gareth.
Yeah, I'm Gareth Davies. I'm project lead at HOLOPLOT here. I've been here for about 4.5 years. I've been, working with the projects team who take kind of projects from early conception right through to kind of installation and commissioning, looking at a really sort of wide range of projects. So, what we're going to do today, we're going to focus in on the Sphere, but then how that relates to, other people's venues are actually dialing in and listening to this. So we kind of really see how you can capture that sound of the Sphere in your own venue, and hopefully I can relate to that.
Oh, I'm sure you'll have a lot of experience to share. Okay, so I think Sphere probably doesn't really need an introduction, because I think at some point or another, all of our social media was flooded with videos and footage from the opening shows. So sorry about that also, because we probably contributed to that. But it really is one of a kind venue, and it really, the idea was really to have a next generation live entertainment experience. So the company behind Sphere, the Madison Square Garden company, they've really conceptualized this as the kind of most advanced concert venue on the planet. And it's not really just the AV, not just the audio and video, but that's obviously the most important aspect, where you think about this enveloping visual and the enveloping sound. And we've been very lucky to work on it, very happy, and worked very hard on it, of course. But what we ended up with is really the world's largest, fully integrated, invisible, we'll talk about this later also, concert-grade system designed by HOLOPLOT. So U2 opened the venue with its Achtung Baby residency, and alongside of it, the film called Postcards from Earth was and is still actually screening, of course, in the venue. So you can kind of see both of those. Let's have a quick look into the venue inside. I just wanted to very quickly show you a flyover video of it, just to give you a sensation of space. So from my perspective, really, I think the main element, the main first impression was that scale of the project. So you really have the feeling, the videos actually almost look like it's CGI, right? They don't almost look real, because that was the feeling, really. But at the same time, what surprised me was that that feeling of intimacy, which is kind of weird in a way, because you have those two different feelings there at the same time, and obviously the sense of immersion, and it's really another level. You really feel like you're plugged into that story. What was your impression of Sphere?
Yeah, similar. I mean, I guess kind of on a technical level a little bit, it's that sort of sense of proximity that you're getting. The way we're able to control sound, really control that direct to reverberant ratio that we have, and so the sound feels very, very close, even though you're a very long way, in certain seats from the stage. I was really sort of blown away by that, and there's certainly something that I've never experienced before in a venue of that scale, for sure.
Absolutely. It's like Bono was singing just for you, if that's what you're into. Okay, so what are we going to cover today? We will look at the Sphere design, the system design in Sphere as a challenge. So what would you be considering as a system designer? We'll touch on the HOLOPLOT technology, but focus really on the solutions that we have found and how these capabilities are applicable to other projects as well. And then we kind of do a bit of back and forth. So that's how I'll introduce a concept and ask Gareth to kind of tell us a bit more about his experience with other projects. We have, just a quick note, we have a few HOLOPLOT experts in the chat, so please feel free if there's any questions, anything that needs clarification on the spot, hopefully they can answer, but we will have also at the end Q&A, so there will be time for questions, so please ask away or save these questions for the end. Okay, so let's dive in. So I wouldn't want to directly tell you how we did it. I would like to first invite you to join me to kind of together think about what it would be like to have to design it. So imagine it's 2017, you're a sound system designer, and this project actually lands on your desk, right? Amazing. What will be the things that you actually have to consider? Where would you even start with this? So there are a few things we will kind of look at one by one. And let's say consider this is partly your brief, right, as a designer. So first and most obvious thing is that it's a spherical building. Any acoustician in the room, and probably even any non-acoustician in the room, understands that this is going to be a challenge. There's a very, very specific and unique geometry, and sound behaves in a very specific way within it. So it's not, then second thing, not only the shape, but also the actual scale of it. So the building itself, just to give you a bit of orientation, it's a 75-meter height from the bottom of the GA floor to the top of the interior of the building. So again, we have spherical shape and this massive, massive scale. Next thing would be the audience size. So we have 18,600 seats. The full audience is about 20,000 capacity. So when you add the GA floor standing level, you have about 20,000 people. And the next thing would be to consider, obviously, the fact that it's a beautiful 18K screen, LED screen, the size 16,000 square feet. And when you have a screen like that, of course, the last thing you will be allowed to do is to place any loudspeakers in front of it, right? So the next challenge on your side, or part of your brief, would be, how do I place all the sound system behind the LED screen? So that's a kind of a challenge of in itself already. And then kind of linked to all of this is also the fact that, okay, sorry, I covered that already. So LED, all the sound system behind the LED screen. Linked to it is the fact that you have quite a large distance between the front of the venue, so where the proscenium array is, where the stage actually is located, and the very back. So it's about 110 meters. And now, as a reminder, we're not allowed to place any speakers in front of the screen, meaning we are not allowed to put any delays in. And this has kind of a double challenge here, because not only we have to deliver that SPL over distance, but also we are in Las Vegas, right? So the humidity of air is actually quite low locally. It can be 20%, it can be actually lower than that. So this is obviously, again, acousticians in the room will know exactly what where I'm heading to here with this. For those who are not so familiar with the physics of sound, sound will struggle to pass through air, maintaining all its spectral uniformity. So it's really the high frequencies that will suffer the most at the back of the bow. So that's the kind of another challenge to add there. And of course, most importantly, it's supposed to be, a fully immersive, huge scale venue. So then you will start considering things like sweet spot. Is a sweet spot enough? Wouldn't I need a sweet zone, etc., etc.? So all these different things come into play, and we'll try to kind of solve them one by one. This is obviously by no means all of the considerations, but that's what we'll focus on today. And again, 2017, this is your project, and what do you do? So obviously, naturally, I think you would look to what's the most advanced system on the market at the time. What are the best tools that I can work with? Naturally, you might turn to line arrays, and the question really that you'd be asking yourself is could this actually work? And maybe, Gareth, you can give us a moment to kind of, from a system designer perspective, a consideration of, what would line arrays do or not be able to do in this venue?
Well, there's a few limitations, and I think you talked about this to a degree. First of all, you want to get the actual system out of the line of sight because of the screen. In terms of sort of the physical properties of a line array, you've got a certain curvature that you're going to need to be able to achieve to be able to cover all of the tiers. So obviously that presents its own challenge in itself because the screen's actually curving a different way.
Right.
So the integration, the amount of space that would take to be able to actually put line arrays physically behind the screen would be really difficult and possibly not possible at all. And then in terms of that, energy over the distance, obviously you've got that loss of level in terms of a 3 dB per doubling of distance
Right.
with the line source. So you would expect to see a considerable drop off in the SBL from front to back over 110 meters. And that wasn't acceptable in terms of that venue. What we wanted to do is create the same experience for everyone, whether you're right at the front or whether you're right at the back. And, line array technology at the time and still now is not able to actually fundamentally do that.
That's right, and that's, I mean, actually the venue initially was designed, or line arrays were considered in the design originally until HOLOPLOT got involved in the project, but obviously for those reasons it wasn't the first choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so really while the building was being designed and developed and built, we at HOLOPLOT have developed the world's first matrix array. So we use a couple of technologies within that, namely the 3D audio beamforming and wave field synthesis. In fact, Gareth did a whole webinar on that, so maybe we don't want to make him repeat that. If you're interested in more detail on those specifics, I think it's called...
An introduction to X1.
Right.
But shall I maybe just summarize the slide very quickly. So, on the left-hand side, we've got 3D audio beamforming. And that's a key pillar of our technology. So there's two main pillars. So the 3D audio beamforming is the ability to control sound in both the horizontal and the vertical axes, giving you really precise control of sound. We'll move into kind of optimization and the other parts later on in the presentation, but just to kind of look at the fundamentals. Then the second pillar is the wave field synthesis. And when we look at that, we're talking about proximity and we're talking about localization to an audio source. So the ability to be able to actually place an audio source at a point in space where it's perceived to be in that position, whether that's in front of the array or behind the array. That's a very high-level summary, but just to give you an impression of what our technology can do.
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, I actually personally, for my own brain, I like to think about it as the kind of functional beams and fun beams. So that's why it's just easy for me to remember as well. but also I think the concept of beams, right? We usually talk about light in context of beams. What we're really doing at HOLOPLOT is embracing this concept of a beam in context of audio, and I think that's really really nice. Something that we'll look at together as we go along. Okay, so we'll focus on basically, instead of going into the depths of what and how exactly, we'll focus on how they actually solve issues and how they solve problems and challenges that we have in designing a venue like Sphere, or other projects that Gareth will bring his expertise in. So very briefly, the unique capabilities that we'll look at will be sound control, then very related to it, optimized coverage, how we conceal the speakers behind the LED screen, the system flexibility, so again, the kind of digital, in the digital domain as well, and the unique immersive tools. Let's jump right in. So sound control is the first one. The key thing here that we would like to maybe have you think about is the acoustic energy and how we kind of send it in places where we want it to be and avoid it from places we don't want it to be. Now, obviously, you can imagine where I'm heading with this. So the idea is that we cover audience, but try to eliminate the acoustic energy from the walls and from the building itself. So it's kind of, again, like a light bulb. I'm going to do a lot of comparisons today to light. So light bulb, you switch it on, energy goes in all directions. Now imagine the kind of theater spotlight where you can choose which specific person or which area you actually illuminate. And now take it one step further. When you think of laser pointers, you can really point at a single spot. And the laser pointer is a really cool example as well here, because when we think of that, it's a system that kind of allows you to maintain the intensity of light over a very long distance. And that's going to come in play when we talk about HOLOPLOT as well. Mm-hmm. I'll hand over to you for this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is one thing we just didn't touch on when we talked about line array technology earlier. And that is the fact that, you have this fixed horizontal dispersion. So you don't have that control into the flexibility, into the control in the horizontal. It's a fixed dispersion. I mean, looking at this, I'll actually bring my mouse across so we can see this. So in the vertical plane, actually it's pretty consistent in level from front to back. What we're seeing there. We're seeing some hot spotting at the front, and that's just a case of proximity to the array itself. But generally it's consistent, from front to back over a certain distance. But then in the horizontal, we see that, you don't have that control. It is that fixed dispersion pattern. And if you do have, like, say, a curved wall here, for instance, you're unable to keep the energy off that side wall. And that then, gives you unwanted reflections, potential audible echoes in the space. We move that onto the right-hand side and we look at the HOLOPLOT technology and we look at kind of our 3D audio beamforming. We're able to achieve this. So back to this kind of sound control in the horizontal and the vertical. And we're able to really precisely define that audience area. And within that area, you can, keep that energy where you want it, taking it away from the walls and the reflective surfaces exactly where you don't want it. So avoiding those surfaces. So, that's really key, I think, in terms of to why this technology was used in the sphere.
Exactly. Thanks. Yeah, and it's really, you can obviously already see how useful this capability alone is or was in Sphere. So we're kind of solving already a couple of issues that we mentioned earlier. The fact that it's a spherical building, so we kind of, in a way, by doing having control over sound using the 3D audio beamforming technology, we kind of, in a way, one might say, detach ourselves from the building itself. So we really focus on that direct sound. So that's kind of one element of it. Here again, it's a visualization of an audio beam, just to show you from the proscenium array within the venue. And again, this is just one example. There are plenty of other beams there, but again, that's just to show you that. And then we kind of solved, let's say, already that first issue we had, the first challenge we had, which is a spherical shape of the building. Then we also kind of touched on that energy over distance. So I mentioned 110 meters from the proscenium array to the very back of Bow. And again, when we think about here in context of that, the sound control we have results in that efficiency over distance. So we have minimal drop. And also what we use is the feature we've developed, which is basically air absorption compensation. And this is specifically designed for cases where you have to throw over long distance, where the high frequency sound propagation would be affected by that air absorption, essentially. So that's the two, maybe even three of the challenges of the Sphere solved already, but because obviously you've worked on projects where this has been useful also.
Absolutely, yeah, and as a designer, having those tools available, really make it a much easier process. But, in the Sphere, to some degree, because you've got this hemispherical geometry, you've actually got a certain uniformity to actually where the speaker placements are. You are kind of in a fixed distance from the audience. Even though the audience is tiered, you are slightly closer at the back than you are at the front. But generally speaking, there's not actually that much complexity to it. When you look then at kind of, an architecture that is more complex, and we're looking at, one of the largest mosques in North Africa here that we actually deployed a system to, I think it was last year, and this is Masjid Nazir. Then it's much more complex in terms of the geometry and the placement of the speakers. Here, you really have to focus on the constraints in terms of where you're able to integrate the system, keeping the speakers out of line of sight. You don't want to have a negative impact on this amazing kind of ornate architecture. So, I mean, we're going to look at some of the actual speaker placements in a second. But, when we're working with historical buildings, it really is, key to being able to integrate these things seamlessly. But to give you an understanding of kind of scale here, I mean, we're talking 10,000 square meters in terms of surface area. We're talking 100-meter throws from front to back of this venue. So very relatable to the Sphere in that respect. Very similar scale. The volume is very high in this space also. And because we've got actually quite hard reflective surfaces, the reverberation time in this space is probably higher than what we'd actually have in the Sphere. In fact, definitely higher than what we had in the Sphere. So looking then at the placement of some of these speakers, and what we did here, so I'm saying it's 10,000 meters squared in terms of surface area, and we were able to cover this entire area with just 9 array positions. And looking at that, like moving on to that, some of these positions, so I'm just circling the kind of top right here now, we've got these 2 arrays here are 26 meters high, just sitting below this dome, which actually sits at 60 meters high in total. You wouldn't be able to do this with conventional technology because you wouldn't be able to steer the sound down and still be able to cover the area that you have here. And with our sound control and our 3D audio beamform, we'll be able to precisely control the energy in that space. And then going down to kind of the right-hand side, and now we're looking at control over distance. So here we have, arrays placed. I think that they were about 4.5 meters high, and they throw 100 meters almost to the back of this venue. There's a couple of things here in terms of we obviously had to get the arrays high enough. So when we talk about the grazing instance, we have to get it above people's heads. We don't want to lose that energy in the first 10, 20 meters by all being absorbed by the people standing in front of it. So we had to get that height in order to be able to do that. But we also had to control the beam in terms of the opening angle of the beam had to maintain over that distance. So it didn't open up like a conventional system would. There wouldn't be that kind of convergence of the wavefront, and it wouldn't hit the back wall because you get that slap back off the back wall as well. And there's a number of positions in there where we had to avoid kind of pillars, so we didn't get an immediate slap back to where the imam was. And then a lot of this was about kind of localization and making sure that you were pulling, the attention of everyone in the audience into where the imam was speaking. So there's a number of things we had to consider, when we were doing design. But all of this relates back to the sphere and the fact it's this control over distance, it's this ability to, precisely put the energy where you want it.
Yeah. And detaching yourself from the acoustics of the space.
Exactly, yeah. And overall, improving the speech intelligibility in that space, which is a point we'll get back to in a second, actually, with another example. And in fact, transport hubs here. This is something that we really have to focus on as designers. And this is sort of a more practical application, almost going back to the roots of HOLOPLOT in terms of where the technology came from. So when we talk about transport hubs, we're talking about, long platforms. This is a typical kind of train station that we're looking at here. We've got 4 platforms here. What we're trying to achieve is not getting any overspill from one platform to adjacent platforms, because if you do that, then ultimately the intelligibility of the sound gets driven down if there's spill between platforms. And what we've achieved here is able to actually throw the sound very long distances. So we've reduced the number of mounting positions in terms of loudspeakers. We have that control over distance to get a consistent SPL all the way down the platform. And again, saying about that reduction in terms of that breakout, and just to kind of show that very clearly in terms of that breakout, when we've just got one platform live here, so just the speakers on the platform at the bottom there, just bring my mouse across so it's clear, you can see that the energy is very precisely controlled into this area here, which allows a number of things. It allows, first of all, you can have, better communication of timetabling information for that specific train, on that platform. You don't get the bleed across into other platforms. You can have, precise kind of wayfinding for people walking around the station in particular zones of the station. So it really kind of opens up a few things in terms of the technology and the way you're actually able to apply it. Beyond that, when we then talk about speech intelligibility, then what we want to do is have a complete evenness of that sound across the platform. And that leads us on to our next topic in terms of optimized coverage, and I'm going to hand back to you.
Right. Yes, let's jump to that, and I have to say that we have kind of artificially split those 2 topics for the purpose of today's session. They will be inherently very tied together, but let's explain why. So we talked about that control of energy, where it goes, where it doesn't go, etc., and obviously the minimal drop over distance. Now, how about let's consider basically what happens actually within that. So let's say we cover it there, but what is that experience like once we actually have sound in there? And really, what I'm getting at here is that uniformity of coverage. So I'll take us over to Sphere for a moment, and this image is a simulation result from Sphere, obviously the audience areas within Sphere. We're showing here coverage achieved using the main PA system. I'll explain a little bit more about the layers here, but this is coming from the proscenium array and the fills, so not from the environmental and other effects layers of sound. So we're achieving really a remarkable 98.4%, right, over coverage within that 102 plus minus 3 dB level. So this is a really remarkable achievement. Obviously, this is a result of Well, I think fair to say years of work and years of development of the product and simulation software, etc., etc. So it's not. It took a while to get there, of course.
And absolutely, I mean, it's incredible. It's unheard of, you know, of a venue this scale to be able to achieve within that tolerance of plus or minus 3 dB, that level of coverage, you know, a level of homogeneity. Yeah, you very rarely see that with any system, on that scale.
And for those who don't know how to read these images, it may look a bit like a boring image, right? Because it's just the same color, but that's the point. So I think maybe what's kind of interesting to mention here as well is that one of the briefs or one of the kind of targets within Sphere was to actually achieve that highest possible spectral uniformity across all the tiers. That's why that color is so uniform. That's what we work towards. But this is also something that's a choice. So really, once you've got this tool, you can really think about, for example, you may choose to have the GA standing floor higher level, and you may choose to have a section of the sphere playing at a slightly lower level for people who don't actually enjoy very high levels. So it's very flexible, and I think that's the most important thing, that you can not only choose where you send the energy, but also what kind of energy, what spectral uniformity. So it's all very flexible from that perspective. And this kind of capability was used also in other projects. So I'll just let you mention the arena.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's the one that was immediately relatable for people. We were almost inundated with requests for projects around arenas and stadiums, sort of globally. Because everyone saw that, you know, the technology that was used in the Sphere would immediately kind of improve, you know, the performance of the system actually being specified for arena or stadium, because you're looking at similar distances that you're throwing. You're looking at, you know, slightly sort of difficult, you know, acoustic space, and probably more difficult again than the Sphere in terms of, you know, reverberation time, hard surfaces that you're working with, high background noise levels. So there's a number of things that you kind of have to consider, obviously, when you're doing this design. But there really was that kind of influx, because people immediately saw that, you know, that technology would work for them. And you know, we're going to show in terms of that. But the actual system design, let's have a quick look at that then. And I'll move my mouse over. So we've got kind of an inner ring that's actually integrated into the scoreboard here. And that's really nice. That kind of pulls the localization into where the action is on court. So you've got that center ring. So everyone in those kind of lower tiers immediately kind of drawn into the action. It doesn't feel like it's, you know, above or overhead. And the fact that, you know, if you can integrate it into the scoreboard itself, then in terms of the aesthetic, it looks really clean in terms of how you do that. Then you've got an upper ring that actually sort of sits above and out of the line of sight in most instances, that is able to then cover the upper tiers. Now let's have a quick look at kind of the SPL mapping, and again we're still seeing these similar numbers that we saw at the Sphere. You know, 99.7% coverage, you know, at 102 dBA, and that's the plus or minus 3 dB tolerance as well. And that's so consistent over the entire arena. And again, that is kind of unheard of. And certainly with this number of speaker positions and in this very sort of centralized location, usually you'd have to have a distributed system picking up all of these levels to be able to achieve the actual consistency of level right across there. And then we've got additional functionality with the HOLOPLOT system as well, haven't we? So it's not just the fact that you've got this optimization and you're able to cover, you know, so precisely and so homogeneously, you're actually able to pick out very sort of clear zones here as well. So look on the left-hand side, it's almost laser precision like you were talking about earlier in terms of how we're actually able to pick out a very specific zone. And this maybe could be a fan zone, for instance. You could have some sort of targeted marketing. It could be VIP boxes where you want specific messaging going to them or a different level going to them. It just allows you that control. And we talked about, you know, maybe picking out a zone where you have the home supporters and the away supporters and having different levels in them, and playing with the psychology of it, and sort of ruining the atmosphere for the away fans and really picking it up for the home fans. You know, there's a lot in that really. And then we see on the right hand side we've got one tier active, and then we've got actually turned another tier off. And if you've got sort of, you know, a concert, or you only sold a certain amount of seats within the actual venue itself, then you're ultimately reducing your energy consumption because there's no requirement for the whole system to be on, and you can just specifically pick out the zones you want, and you're not exciting the space as much as well, so you're kind of improving the intelligibility of the overall system. So that's kind of that scale, and like I say, that was easily sort of transferable in terms of how that works, and we're seeing some really good results. And I say there's a lot of projects we're looking at currently around that. But then looking at a smaller scale and how that kind of relates to, let's say, university lecture hall here, and same technology, and we're still talking about 3D audio beamforming. We're still talking about optimization in terms of the evenness of the coverage. So in a lecture hall, what we're looking to do, we've got hard surfaces on the walls. We want to keep the energy off the walls, and we want to precisely put it on the seats where we're targeting. This improves the intelligibility, it reduces reflections, and ultimately it makes it much more accessible. It allows, if you're driving up the intelligibility, then people are able to concentrate for longer, and that just improves the learning experience, which is what this is all about in terms of working in education. And let's look at the SPL chart for that as well. So we can see really evenness of coverage then from front to back. And we've also put in a void level on stage. And by doing that, reducing the level on stage, we're able to drive up the sort of gain before feedback level. And there's a number of benefits there. Obviously, you get more level out of the microphone, so you potentially get better intelligibility. But a lot of the time in universities, you have non-technical members of staff who just want to come in, throw a microphone on, and they want it to be safe. They don't want it to be feeding back and struggling with level. And if you're able to kind of avoid the stage like that, then it makes it much safer, and they're much more confident in using the system then, which again then improves the teaching experience because they're not worried about the technology. So there's a few things there that we want to look at. But talking about kind of that avoidance on stage, and one point I wanted to make is obviously in the sphere, going back and relating that back to the sphere, creating that avoidance level, we've got the huge proscenium sat in behind the stage, and we were able to very much sort of keep the energy off the stage. It's not just about that, it's about the consistency of the level as well. You don't have this hot spotting. So you don't have these peaks where if you walk into it with a microphone, you're gonna get this, the real high frequency feedback there. That doesn't happen. It's very consistent. It's very kind of manageable in that respect as a front of house engineer, because you know what you're up against. You know they're not gonna walk directly in front of a speaker and that spike's gonna happen. You feel safe in terms of the way you set up your system. So just wanted to make a point about that.
And actually Sphere, for the most part, you two are playing right in front of that main proscenium array.
Absolutely,
So
yeah.
it's almost 500 modules of HOLOPLOT, and they're right in front of it. So it's obviously a full rock concert level, and it's all happening in front of the...
And there was no issues with gain before feedback.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. It comes as a consequence of the design of the actual hardware, the speaker itself, right?
Exactly right, right.
Maybe talking a little bit about that rock concert level, how do we deliver that kind of level at pristine quality from behind the LED screen? Because that was obviously a challenge of its in itself. Right, so this is a still from the film from Postcards on Earth, Postcards from Earth, sorry, and so yeah, what you obviously can't see is the speakers. I'll show you later on a little indication of where they are from the perspective of the audience, and how we used also VR tools to be able to sit in the venue and kind of be able to point and know exactly where they are. But a little kind of maybe important detail is we have 54 arrays behind the LED screen, so that's 1,200 something modules. So not all of them are behind the LED screen. There are also surrounds, and these you can see as you just turn around, and they're behind you, of course. But what's the important consideration here? So here I have a couple of images from the anechoic room from probably 2018. And the reason I wanted to show them to you is one that obviously we have done quite a lot of measurements with the LED screen. But the difference between the image on the left and on the right. So obviously on the left you can see very clearly through it. And the image on the right, you kind of know because I told you what it is, but I think it would be kind of difficult to actually see through, right? So what I'm trying to kind of make a point on is that the opacity or transparency of the LED screen changes as the angle through which you view through it changes. So that means the sound will obviously pass more easily at the right angle, straight through. And there will be some losses when you look at steering sound to each side, or even kind of having a wider opening angle in terms of a beam. So this is something that we really had to consider. And I think what's also very important is that arrays in a sphere are of different sizes, so they're not all identical, and not all have identical condition, the local condition, meaning that the distance from the LED screen was kept more or less equal. However, obviously the screen curves and the arrays are flat. So there is that slight difference between them. So what we had to develop and had to work on is this kind of angle-dependent EQ, which allows us to compensate for that insertion loss of the LED screen, accounting for all these different differences, all these differences between the locality and the conditions of the speakers. And this is also very important, that what you mentioned, right? We have control not just in the horizontal, so not just in the vertical, but also in the horizontal axis. And this also basically means we can apply this algorithm in the horizontal domain.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about kind of the 3D balloon in terms of that radiation pattern of the speaker, and think about that in a 3D context. As you're getting sort of more off axis of the actual loudspeaker itself, then the angle of incidence then through the LED screen, as you showed in that image, prior, actually, it's more difficult to pass through, and you're getting much more sort of high frequency losses.
Exactly.
So actually, what had to boost the high frequencies, but just at that angle of incidence. So, that balloon starts to look really interesting at the high frequencies because we're boosting it there, and you just have to see the different shapes that you see, which you wouldn't expect from, the usual radiation pattern of the speaker. But I think the important thing, obviously, then is it's the same, one side of the LED screen as it is the other as a result of that. And
this is just a very, very kind of high-level image demonstrating exactly that, right? So we're looking at the beam coming from an array on the left side without the LED screen in front of it. Then we insert that LED screen in front of it, and we have losses on edges, as you can see, the bottom and top. And essentially, compensation we apply to our beams is allowing us to kind of bring it back to where it was originally before that insertion of the LED panel. Mm-hmm. And so actually what's interesting, I think, is that at HOLOPLOT we have hardly ever worked on a project where we show the speakers. They're always placed behind something, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's usually a bit of either a battle with the architect in terms of maintaining that design and not kind of encroaching on their architectural vision, or it's a case of the fact that in this instance we're going to talk about, and very similar to the sphere, you're trying to create this immersive experience. And when you do that, if you really want to pull people in, you want them to forget about the technology. You don't want them to be able to see what it is that's creating that environment that they're being sort of pulled into. And the Illuminarium is a very good example of that. So we've taken you backstage now, really, in terms of the Illuminarium, and you can see how the speakers are kind of placed behind the projection wall. So to give you an idea, there's a 360 projection wall inside this space, and it's completely seamless within that space. But what we wanted to be able to do is create localization at an ear height. And in order to be able to do that, obviously we had to place loudspeakers there, but we didn't want to interrupt the projection surface. So what we have here, and what you're looking at now, is the fact that we've got this micro-perforated screen then that sits in front of the actual array itself, or the module itself. That is actually carbon reinforced as well to ensure that it's sort of structural integrity. Because it's at ear height, there is a possibility of potentially people leaning against it, kids being able to touch it, whatever. So you also needed to have that structural integrity. But ultimately, what you wanted to be able to achieve at the end of that, and I'll just bring the sort of next slide up, is this completely kind of seamless kind of finish, I suppose. And this is, and that's what was able to create that. It looked like almost kind of a plaster finish all the way around, and then you were able to project onto that. And it was really, really very impressive. So it gives that greater level of immersion when you're able to do that, but it also gives that greater level of synchronicity between the visual and the audio, which is what you're really trying to achieve, to get that really sort of lifelike feel and pull people into that experience.
Absolutely.
And obviously that was a project you were very much involved with from start to finish. So I don't know if you want to maybe just talk a little bit about your experience of the venue.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You kind of touched on that already. The key thing is that what you can't see in this image, for example, is there are probably about 4 or 5 speakers behind the wall onto which that projection is shown. And it is kind of a weird experience when you stand in front of a kind of a plaster wall and there is perfect sound coming out of it. So it was really, really great to have this integration, and it really is what made it possible for that project to actually come to be like the way it was. So it's really, really important. Okay, let's jump to the next topic. So we covered the sound control, optimized coverage, concealed speakers, and let's jump into system flexibility. So obviously we already talked about beams, and obviously you can have multiple beams coming from each array, and they can be kind of shaped and sized and EQ'd and leveled to your liking, really. So there is a lot of flexibility just coming from that pure fact that you have the beams and have each of them as its own channel, which you can basically alter to your desire. Now, that kind of means really that you can remold your system. So once you've installed the system, so now thinking sphere again, right? You've installed the system, but you show very, very different, or use it for very different use cases, right? So sphere alone, we opened with U2 and the film projection. It's a very different use case. And obviously there's a lot of projects these days that are designed to be multi-purpose, and it's a very difficult design in general. It's a very, again, all acousticians will know that it's very, very difficult to design something that's good for everything. And I think the beauty of having this flexibility and control over sound is that you can actually just remold your sound system really with a click of a button. So what happens in Sphere is that 3 times a day, postcards from Earth are screening, and then in the evening U2 will come and normally you would spend a day or 2 setting up a separate PA system, but we are able to just convert the existing system into a full-on rock concert.
What conventionally would have been a full touring rig. Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So it's really that kind of moldability of it that is very, very interesting here in terms of how flexible it is. In terms of on a smaller scale, let's say, the flexibility of each array. So arrays can have multiple beams coming out of them. So for example, here we're looking at a proscenium array, which is almost 500 modules. It's built out of almost 500 modules. And it can work as its own full single array, or it can be also subdivided into smaller sections for different multi-channel configurations. So for example, you can have it divided into 3 sections where it will be a sort of just a standard left, center, right. You can split it into 5 and it will work as a 5-channel system. So it really is quite flexible in that respect as well, and kind of allows for a lot of fun and a lot of kind of exploration.
Yeah, so and that's all done in the software rather than having to kind of recable anything, which you might have to do, conventionally to actually change where the signal's flowing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And that's exactly what's happening there, right? They just kind of change the preset before the band comes in. So yeah, we have really, I guess maybe, so it's not too overwhelming also, right? There's all these capabilities, 500 modules, 12 channels of audio, 12 beams per array, etc., etc. But actually, ultimately, there are many presets, and you can come with a single mono input, and that will work. Or you can come with 256, and it will also work. The point is that there are obviously presets for it, and it's very easy to just flip between them.
Absolutely, and I think if we take that in the context of the U2 show, in terms of that setup, the major horsepower of the actual system was done through, a typical LCR setup. But then there's amazing moments in the show where you use the system almost like a channel-based system, where you then take Edge's guitar, for instance, and it rises right up above your head, kind of thing, and you can do that, out of a conventional desk setup. You're actually then just bussing in terms of the guitar signal out to the channel that you actually want it to be, and actually get that flow right across the arena. So you're not having to do that sort of really sort of complex workflow, and it feels very kind of normal for a front of house engineer coming in, even though there is that complexity, there is that flexibility, but actually it's very kind of user friendly in the end, and that's how it has to be, really.
Absolutely. So that's kind of talking about the system flexibility in context of Sphere again, and that's probably it's a very complex system consisting of many layers. So we'll also look into this a little bit in a moment. But in terms of using that flexibility for other projects, I think you have a really good example here.
Yeah, absolutely. And just going to sort of move quickly through this one in terms of this. Sort of the concept of this was it was an automotive show in Shanghai, and this was for Polestar. So there was a car launch with a keynote speech. Was kind of one of the applications they wanted to use it for. But then they actually wanted to use that exhibition stand as a car showroom where they had some really interesting sort of information points in there, really wanted to kind of focus audio into very specific areas. And I'll sort of show you what that setup looked like. So then we sort of considered the design of that. So on the left-hand side, so we have 3 arrays, and I'll bring my mouse over. So we've got the main array that's actually creating the coverage beam. So this larger purple box. So we've got this controller sound in terms of keeping the energy within that, because we don't want it to bleed out to other exhibition stands. So it's really important to be able to do that. We have the optimization in terms of the coverage across the space, so it's even all the way through as you walk through the exhibit. And then you can see these squares that we actually have here, and they're representing this kind of real focus content. We have information about the car that you're standing next to, which kind of makes it much more interactive in terms of an experience. So that was interesting in itself. But then on the right-hand side, what we actually changed then for the keynote speech, you see we've created these 2 zones. And in these 2 zones, we have completely independent audio within there. So we had a presenter on stage presenting in Mandarin. And then on the left-hand side, you had actually, it's in Mandarin, and then on the right-hand side, you actually had it in English. So you had live translation on stage, and that was the first time that had actually been done. And it was really, really effective. And that just shows kind of, in the daytime, they wanted this car showroom. Then in the evening, they had the keynote speech, and that was all kind of on the flick of a preset to be able to change the system in order to be able to do that.
Yeah, I love that interactivity element of it, that you walk up to the car, open the door, and a message is just relevant for you for that action. So it's a really cool way to kind of really engage with the people, with the visitors.
Absolutely.
And I think that brings us to the last part of our session today, which is the unique immersive tools. And really, I think in a way we have covered a lot of what makes the immersive tools, the toolbox at HOLOPLOT. So essentially, the combination of all these different capabilities, which we talked about already, bring together this toolbox, this immersive toolbox. So essentially, it's kind of it allows you to hone in on the sound control. And this will be very important when we talk about in a second on the kind of localization. It allows you to bring audio closer to people. It allows you to target specific groups of people or an individual within that group. So it's a very nice way to start really shaping your soundscape in a kind of a lot more intricate way.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the Sphere, I think that's what a lot of people have heard about the Sphere in terms of what they expect from that sound system. Yes, it can it can create these zones. It can create this very sort of focused content. It's really interesting the way you can layer up this sonic experience that you have. And it's completely unique in the fact that it's able to do that. I think you're just going to talk about maybe some of the formats that actually the system's able to achieve as well in terms of that flexibility again, but in terms of that immersion. Because you obviously got so many channels to work with, you can create all these kind of different formats to work with in terms of video formats. I don't think we need to go into too much detail here in terms of the actual sort of typical workflow, but we can say that kind of all the modules are Ravenna. So it's all audio over IP. So everything in that respect is kind of digitally controlled, and that's sort of what gives you that flexibility over the entire system to be able to do that. There's just having all of those tools.
And going maybe a little bit into, not so much because we don't have enough time to go into the details of this, but I just want you to kind of be aware of the fact that the design of Sphere was actually using layered approach. So I touched on the proscenium array a little bit before already, which I think I can maybe point them out here. So proscenium array being obviously that largest array in the center. We have the 28 environmental arrays. I'll show you that in a second in isolation. We have the effects array, so there's 3 of those on each side of the proscenium, which kind of expands that image out of the proscenium array. We have surround arrays, and these are all the modules which I mentioned are not hidden behind the LED screen. They are the ones which are actually behind you if you're sitting in or standing in sphere. And we have some under balcony delay, so there's obviously a balcony level, and some modules help with that along with the fills. They support that coverage of the main proscenium array. So just a little bit maybe go into a little bit more detail about the environmental layer. And this is really supporting that sound localization across that huge LED screen around and above you. And each of these arrays, so they are 20 modules in size, so 4 by 5. Each of them has 5 module ATSs, which are the ones with 18-inch sub. Each of these arrays is covering the entirety of the 10K capacity central immersive area. So for visual reasons, and also the film when it's screening, it's not the tickets are not available for all the entirety of the venue. It's that immersive section in the middle for visual reasons, and we were able to actually match that with the coverage that we delivered for it. And what's important is each of these 28 arrays is delivering full coverage for each of those, and that actually means that we don't have a sweet spot, right? We have really a sweet zone. So wherever you are within those 10,000 seats, you'll have a really perfect localization. So then obviously think of not just the number of arrays, but also the fact that you can play with all these different elements from these arrays, like bringing an object closer to someone, sending potentially half the venue can watch a film and leave, and they don't do it in this film, but that's something that's absolutely a possibility, that you could kind of show the same film but have people hear different things, right, at the same time.
Yeah.
So here I'm overlaying the system, at least some of the modules from the kind of audience perspective, so you can kind of get an idea of what they look like. And I mentioned the kind of use of VR tools. So here it's just again the same overlay using a VR set, because obviously you can't see them. So from a system designer or show programming point of view, this is extremely helpful to have these tools. And talking about tools, I guess let me just go back to this one. Of course, we use our HOLOPLOT Plan and HOLOPLOT Create tools. That's where you kind of design and prepare your target groups of people with sound or an individual with sound. HOLOPLOT Create is a tool we are developing to be able to oralize it. So before the system is actually installed, you are able to already get a really good understanding of where and how you've placed your sound around your venue. And just finally, I just wanted to leave that quote because I really love it, because the end result really is a very happy system user, not just, who's more important? Very happy system user, and also very, very happy every single member of the audience, because everyone's getting this intricate immersive mix delivered to them. And in the sphere, of course, I think my favorite moments where there's a scene with a spider, where the spider kind of sits right in front of you, and then it sort of jumps at you, and the sound really just sort of follows that, and everyone just screams suddenly. And I think another scene with where you're in a jungle and there's a lot of monkeys around you, and really with your eyes closed, you could perfectly pinpoint where each of those monkeys would be located.
Absolutely.
That was really cool.
Localization was very, very precise. We're just going to move through to just a couple of very sort of quick examples of kind of how we've used these immersive tools for other shows that we've done or other projects that we've done over the last year or so. One of them is Lightroom in King's Cross. Here we had some sort of real constraints in terms of where we're actually able to put the loudspeakers. So that was kind of the first challenge in this space. But then we're able to get around that with the actual creative and immersive tools that we have. I'll move on to kind of this slide here to show this. So again, like the last project that I showed, we have this array that's creating this coverage beam that gives this evenness of coverage right across the audience, allowing you to have sort of background noise or a general kind of soundscape across the entire area. But given the constraints that we had, we were only able to place loudspeakers at either end of the space. This is a big concrete box, and we weren't able to integrate speakers anywhere else to create a surround sound system. But we wanted to be able to give that sort of sense of envelopment. And in order to do that, we actually use that kind of sound control and actually our wavefield synthesis kind of part of the technology to create these reflections off the walls, almost creating like virtual loudspeakers in the space. And we actually created 3 of those up each of the walls. And it gives you this complete sort of sense of envelopment within the space, and really kind of does provide that next level kind of immersion, rather than just having a coverage system, which you would only been able to do with a conventional system. And then another example of this, and this is kind of a real sort of smaller scale now, is the Buena Vista Social Club that is actually showing just off Broadway in Chelsea. This has been sort of really successful, really strong reviews, and a lot of the reviews have very much pointed out the audio in here, because it's really quite interesting what's been done here. So just kind of have a look at the venue itself, and it's a very small venue. It's only 200-seater in terms of this venue. And you can see that the actual deployment of HOLOPLOT speakers, I'm just kind of circling that there, is only 3 of our MD96 modules. So a very small system. But in terms of what's been sort of created there, so again, kind of the coverage, real kind of evenness of coverage from front to back, controlling the energy in the space because you've got hard reflective surfaces on the sidewalls, reducing the level on stage as well, and giving you that kind of sort of gain before feedback, really sort of increasing that. So they're all the kind of fundamental things that we've talked about. The technology, again, that relates back to the sphere in terms of how that works. But what we did here, we actually created 2 virtual sources. And when we talked about virtual sources earlier, we talked about proximity to the sound. Mm-hmm. And what we did, we brought the audio sources almost out into the audience area. So you had maybe a main voice on stage, and then you had backing voices that felt like they're actually coming from the audience itself, really drawing you into the actual into the show itself. And a lot of people have commented on that in terms of how kind of immersive, how interactive it feels as a result of doing that. And you've actually seen the show, so you can probably talk more to that in terms of
a really beautiful show. I mean, I cry a lot, but I cried a lot. It was really beautiful, and obviously that effect, the sound was, just everything about it was wonderful, actually, to be honest. But that was very special to be able to bring that sound out into the audience.
Absolutely. Yeah. So bringing that kind of that sphere technology into kind of the smaller venue, mm-hmm. really creating some really interesting and impactful kind of soundscapes there. I think we're going to wrap up there.
Yes,
I'm just going to go into a summary, aren't we, in terms of what we've covered today,
yes.
And then we'll go into a short Q&A off the back of that.
Yes. So while I do that, maybe you can have a quick look at what the questions might be, if there's still something unanswered.
Yes, I will. I'll have a quick.
And I'll just very quickly walk us through what we kind of covered today. So obviously, first and foremost, the precise control of sound, where that energy goes and where it doesn't go. So we can avoid reflective surfaces and work in venues which perhaps otherwise would be very difficult to work with amplified sound. Then obviously we have the evenness of coverage we talked about as well. So every audience member can, if you choose to, it can receive the same experience, or you can choose to give them a very different experience. Then we talked about that fully concealed system, so how to hide speakers behind LED panels and other different materials, and how to compensate for that transmission loss, and how to kind of bring that headphone quality sound to every seat in a venue like the Sphere. Mm-hmm. And obviously how all these different capabilities come together to really be able to shape next level audio experiences.
Fantastic. Right, I mean, we've got some questions coming through now. I've got on the iPad here, so we'll definitely sort of work our way through some of these. The first one, do you have a demo, so I'll just bring that up. Do you have a demo installation in Europe where I can listen to X1 and X2?
So Europe, we have obviously UK, we have London, Lightroom, which you mentioned.
Absolutely.
Which now runs the Moonwalkers.
Correct, the Tom Hanks show in the Lightroom.
I haven't seen it yet, but so you can go and see it there. We have Dark Matter here in Berlin, which is a very small scale, but also distributed immersive show. Actually, it's really cool to see how that scales as well. So that's also X1. Yeah. And X2, not yet. X2 is we launched it at ISE, but it actually will be available for people who start installing with it towards the kind of second half of the year. So not yet, but we'll obviously keep you posted.
Right, okay, yeah, absolutely. Next one, sort of going into a bit more detail on the Sphere then. How much of the system optimization relies on sound measurement once installed? I think I could probably answer to that. So the optimization obviously looks at the direct SPL and ensures the kind of evenness of coverage across the entire space, you know, looking at that direct sound. Beyond that, obviously, you still need to compensate to, to some degree in terms of the actual room impact. So what we actually did there, we developed our own proprietary software in order to be able to do an assessment of what was measured and what was simulated, and then actually be able to then re-EQ the system in order to actually get the performance that we got in simulation. So we got that very, very close. That was able to take multiple microphone inputs, so we could have a really good spread of microphone across the entire venue to ensure that evenness of coverage across the venue, ensure that we're able to compensate for any of the impact of the room. And it worked really effectively. And in fact, the commissioning kind of process was really quite short in that space, given the size of the venue and the number of loudspeakers was in there. Partly because we had a really efficient workflow, partly because we had constraints of the venue. You know, in terms of the construction timeline was kind of pushed a little bit, and we really had to move faster when we were there. So very, very effective, and we were very pleased that we kind of developed that software, which at some point, maybe be pushed onto the market. But right, where are we going to go for next? Who's actually going to be answering these? Let's have a look. Right, I can definitely do this one. Is a real-time interface for temp humidity changes, say like a transportation hub? Now that's interesting. This is something you could easily develop with the kind of the open source nature of the software that we have. Currently that's not done, and that is a manual process in terms of re-optimization of the system in order to make changes if there is a dramatic change in the kind of humidity or temperature of the venue. But something that you could certainly easily adapt and kind of build into a control system in order to re-optimize if you set certain thresholds beyond kind of a humidity or temperature level. So it isn't in place in the Sphere. It is something that could be developed, relatively easily, but it is something, that would be quite unique to HOLOPLOT in that respect, and the way we do that.
There's actually a related question maybe we can actually answer as well. So the heat signature and propagation from LED screens, and if that has significant audio clarity control challenge. I think it's kind of very similar in that sense, right? That we compensate for it. I think partly also we can answer this in context of you would probably design the LED screen in such a way anyway to move all the brains, all the controllers of the LED away from the modules. But of course, the fact that you can have either live temperature and environmental monitoring fed into the system, and either pre-programmed presets for different ones, so they basically directly jump to the next preset if the temperature goes above certain points. So
yeah, I mean, if it was impacting, operation temperature and that was becoming a problem in terms of the actual modules physically getting too hot, then obviously you're able to monitor that. We've not seen that at all in terms of the information that we've kind of been fed back. And in terms of then the acoustic performance, you could compensate for it on some level. Again, I don't think we've really seen any sort of major impact of that, and you don't feel that in the venue itself in terms of the overall kind of distance you're throwing over and the actual the general ambient temperature in the space itself. So
also it was kind of, we looked at it also the other way, right? So does audio from our modules cause vibration of the screen? So kind of like all of this has been tested significantly.
And I guess that's more important on a projection screen when you've got those surfaces. In LED, not so much, but you have to take into consideration because the amount of sub that's in that building, everything would rattle. So you really have to be sort of, very secure in terms of that. There is, right, so what is the RT60 in the Sphere? And I'm sure we've got specialists online that could answer that very easily. And they're probably going to tell me I'm wrong.
I think it will be on average 2.5 seconds, but please, if there are, if someone's able to correct me if I'm wrong.
It's between 2.5 and 2.8 seconds, I think. But if someone else online has got the exact number, please let us know that. Right, so it says, sounds like you do not need cardioid sub-configuration. That's interesting, because obviously with the proscenium array, it's so large, that actually, in terms of sort of the baffle effect, the physical size of the array itself, the path in terms of round the outside of it reduces the amount of sort of low frequency that you're getting in terms of the re-irradiation of sub. So almost the physical properties of the array itself actually solves that problem for you. So no, they aren't set up in a cardioid setup at all. And obviously, again, because of the physical size of the array itself, you're actually able to control the sound down to almost 30 hertz. So I mean, yeah, you have unbelievable control. And for shows like the U2 show, for instance, most of that is a single LFE beam that is generated from the proscenium array itself. So in terms of bass management, it's very easy. You can get consistent sub levels all the way across the venue, all coming from the actual proscenium array itself. When it gets into the kind of cinema application, then you have to think a little bit more about kind of the bass management, because obviously you want to localize sub at certain levels and move that around. So it gets a little bit more complex in terms of time alignment and things like that there. But no, hopefully that answers your question. Yes, it's not cardioid, and it doesn't need to be in that particular instance because of that.
A bit conscious of time, but maybe we can still answer a couple of these questions. So there is one, whether we require micro perforations or slight openings between the LED panels to apply angle-dependent EQ. So in the Sphere, the screen itself is seamless, so it's built out of smaller tiles, but there are no gaps in between the actual tiles. So it's a completely seamless LED screen. But of course, there are the screen itself is a kind of like a grill, so it has a level of transparency. This is obviously why it worked, right? And we've worked on together with the manufacturer of the screen, in this case, Seiko, in order to optimize that even further. But it's a 9.5 on average pixel definition in the Sphere, and there was no need for any additional, let's say, gaps in between if I understand the question correctly, but there was no need for that additional gap in between the panels.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that pixel pitch is critical in terms of kind of the transparency of the system. You can reduce that down somewhat, but obviously in the Sphere, because the screen is at such a distance, you're able to get away with that, 9.5 mil pixel pitch, and it's still completely seamless. You do not see that perforation. Obviously, if that screen was closer, then you'd have to reduce that pixel pitch, and then you have to do kind of another assessment there in terms of how that works. We've been told to wrap this up, so I think we should probably move that along. There's a number of things, housekeeping, isn't there, in terms of what we want to say before we wrap it up?
Yeah, so obviously feel free to I forgot to switch to this, and well, I thought we had our LinkedIn profiles. Feel free to obviously find us on LinkedIn and connect if there are any further questions. I believe we will be issuing a kind of answers to some of the most frequently asked questions after the session. So thanks for all the participation, and obviously thanks for your time. Anything else I'm forgetting?
If there was project-specific questions, then I believe that we're going to be putting up an email address now, which I believe is info@holoplot.com, but that will come up on a banner now. So anything's project-related, anything that you want us to get back to you on, maybe we can put a concept design together, maybe we can talk to you a bit more in detail about specific projects that you're thinking about where this technology applies, then please get in touch. I think that is everything from me.
Yes, likewise. Thank you
Fantastic.
so much. Thanks for joining me, and thanks for sharing this session, and thank you everyone for joining us. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you at the next future webinars.
Absolutely. Thank you.